Please be aware that I'm not a mental health professional. Some of the content discussed includes real people. My opinions are based solely on speculation and conjecture and cannot be held against me by any person or persons that have committed themselves to watching this installment. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our Opioid Epidemic edition of T7 with Terrible Troll. I'm your host, Terrible Troll, and if you're wondering what T7 stands for, you're on the right track. Tonight, we have our very special conclusion to our opioid epidemic, mainly involving the solution. So, I just want to let everyone know that the solution is not a pretty thing. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but this is getting into the real T7 of it. And I'm really excited tonight because, well, it's not tonight, it's today, it's morning. I'm really excited this morning because tonight I'm going to let her rip. So without further ado, let's get ready to send it. Okay, so welcome back. I really appreciate everybody who went for part 1 and now is tuning into part 2. If you didn't catch part 1, it's basically just me going over my personal opinions on the different severities of the drugs that are used across the world. Mainly, we're talking about the United States and North America. I'm particularly picking on the United States because although we definitely are suffering from the same epidemic, because our population is so small, the scale is much different. But all the views, opinions, perspectives, and solutions that I would offer this morning are the same ones that I would offer my own country, Canada. So what we went over in part 1 was how I had rated drugs and alcohol based on a meter that I had made. And I had put alcohol on the bottom of the meter and I had changed its color to red because alcohol is the most widely used substance and I feel it's to be one of the most dangerous. Unfortunately, the solution for alcohol can't really apply to the drug solution that I'm going to impose. You'll see why as we unfold here. So as we previously discussed, I had stated that marijuana and psilocybins were, in my opinion, not really narcotics. I shared with you one of my personal philosophies that if it grows from the ground, it's safe and sound, and by that I mean that it doesn't have to be processed. So like we had discussed, mushrooms, you can pick them wildly. Marijuana, you can pick it wildly if you'd found it in the wild. You don't have to do anything to it. You just eat it or smoke it, and it does what it does. So the next class of drugs I had put in were more recreational, but I didn't discount them and make them any less dangerous. Those two drugs were ecstasy and cocaine. In between cocaine and ecstasy, I had put opioids, and I had breached that into the methamphetamine and heroin section. So we can see on our meter here basically how I classed each drug. In part 1, I had talked about how we were going to be discussing jails and incarceration rates. I didn't really get into it too much, but here I just wanted to really quickly illustrate before we move into the solution. In September of 2013, the incarceration rate of the United States of America was the highest in the world at 716 per 100,000. It was 4.4% of the world's entire population. Simply Googling deaths in America due to drugs. It says here in the United States, 70,200 people died from drug overdoses in 2017, which was an increase of about 10% over 2016. Since 2000, the U.S. drug overdose death rate has gone from 6.2 per 100,000 in 2000 to 21 per 100,000 in 2018. If we move into Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the drug overdose death rates, basically it states in 2018 there were 67,367. So that's approximately 70,000, which goes back to the 2017 year as well. It says here that opioids were involved in 46,802 overdose deaths in 2018. And that 69.5% of those were all of the drug overdose deaths for all of the drugs that have been used. So we can see that there's a real problem, and there's a lot of people in jail for drugs. We know that from watching all of the U.S. shows that are like Cops and Live PD. I'm definitely a regular watcher of Live PD. I pretty much make it a point to watch Live PD. I find it very interesting, the dynamic from state to state, officer to officer, the criminals and the social aspect of the show is just way too much. I love it. So
I don't agree with a lot of the things that happen on live PD, but I'm a viewer, not a participant, and so that's where that ends. My solution to solve the drug problem is as follows. First, I want to state that this is merely a discussion we're having. I'm going to impose something that's quite horrific, and you can let me know what your opinions are on regarding solving the opioid epidemic as well as other narcotics. We've gone over the difference in narcotics. People are always going to use them. Definitely usage starts on the street. You are going to probably move from one drug to another throughout your lifetime if you choose to use. A lot of people who begin using cocaine and it gets away from them will move into methamphetamines and possibly heroin or further deeper down the rabbit hole. The solution is kind of adverse, and definitely it has a lot of problems because the solution would probably cost a lot of human lives, but I believe it's a long-term solution and can possibly even better society as a whole. Drug addicts commit crimes. It's no doubt. That's how they end up in jail. Whether it's from driving around with a sock full of meth in your pickup truck and getting pulled over for having no light on your license plate tag, or armed robbery, home invasion, anything you can think of under the sun, including murder, falls under the drug category. Vast majority of the people who are incarcerated today in the United States of America, it's going to be drug related. Whether or not the charges that they're serving are drug related, I'm not saying that they are going to be. I'm just saying that the vast majority of the people who are incarcerated, they're going to be involved in selling drugs, dealing drugs, or committing crimes, possession of drugs in a lot of states. That's basically the bottom line. So what we can agree on is that drugs cause a lot of crime. And crime's a bad thing because as far as I'm concerned, we're all just trying to live in society and get along with each other. And we already have enough problems with morons and fucking idiots who can't figure shit out. One thing we can do is we can solve the drug problem over the course of, I think, would take between 3 to 10 years. And here's how I would do it. First things first, complete fire hazard. This is a complete fire hazard. Don't worry, I've thought this through. This is about 10 years old, maybe longer, that I've been thinking about this. I've told this to other people. This won't be the first time I've spoken these words out loud. I haven't put like an infinite amount of thought into it. At the end of the day, I don't do drugs and I'm not affected by crime because of my geographic location. Not so badly anyways. I mean, I have had my vehicle broken into, and I'm sure that the people who broke into my vehicle and took my pool bag twice were probably on drugs or it was drug related. But either way, the solution is a warehouse, and it's kind of like a two entrance, two exit warehouse. So you have 2 entrances and 2 exits. Now, the first entrance takes you in to a hospital where you can get counseling. You can have conversations with nurses, doctors, social workers, drug counselors. There's programs there. There's even a hospital bed for you to stay in if you are suffering from withdrawals and you want to get clean. There's no cost to it. It's subsidized by the government. It would need to be. Private industry, don't think this is going to be very profitable for you, but I mean, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. Build a warehouse, 2 entrances, 2 exit. First entrance takes you into a hospital where you have psychological and physical care available to you. And there's an exit. If you're better, you walk out the door. There's no strings attached. You're free to live your life. Now, the second entrance is much different. It's going to cover the major portion of this warehouse. And this warehouse is going to have to be built according to size. And right now, the epidemic's pretty huge, so I'm imagining quite a big place. But this is where the fire hazard comes in, because as you walk through the first entrance, you're scanned. And basically what that is you're just searched and scanned, and you're made sure that you're not carrying any weapons or bringing anything that would be a prohibited item inside the warehouse. Because This warehouse has very strict policies and rules for people who want to enter. There would be a waiver form that would be pretty short and sweet. You could sign it at the front as you walked in. And as you pass your security check and sign your waiver form, you can enter into the main area, which is a giant concrete floor with big drum barrels filled with methamphetamines and heroin and cocaine and ecstasy and fentanyl if you want it. Just you take your pick, right? If it's an illegal narcotic that goes into Troll's yellow meter or red meter or higher, then it's yours, it's free, have at her. So you walk into this facility, you pass your security check, you walk in, and there are just barrels and barrels of free drugs for you everywhere. And there's people all around you. And, you know, when it first opens, it's, of course, it is what it is. It's a warehouse, and it's full of drugs and full of people. But as the weeks go on and time progresses, the atmosphere and the location are going to change drastically, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Now, the deal is with the exit with this place is there's another search involved. You can't take anything out of this building. You can enter this building and do as many drugs as you please to your heart's content. There's bathroom facilities. You're allowed to sleep in there. You can sleep on the floor. Nobody's going to kick you out of there. And when you leave, you have to prove two things. One, that you're sober enough to go out into society. You can't leave the warehouse if you're still high. You can go to the hospital if you want, and you can seek your retribution there. But unless you can represent yourself as sober enough to operate and function properly in society, you wouldn't be allowed to leave. The second thing is that you'd be searched. Now, you'd be searched to make sure that you're not taking any narcotics out of the building. This would have to be a very highly advanced search. I would imagine something similar to a really good intake search at a jail facility. But here are the key points of what we've discussed so far. There's a warehouse. It has two sections. One is for you to get mental and physical help. The other is if you want to do drugs, you can go in there and do drugs for free. Over the course of time, there would be a lot of people dying in these places, obviously. If there's an unlimited amount of narcotics available at your disposal and you're going to go in there, you're going to do them, you're already at a point, you're putting your life in jeopardy, and you're making that decision. That's where the waiver comes in, because people will die in this place. There's going to have to be people to come clean up the bodies. Maybe it has its own crematorium on site. I'm not really sure. I don't think too much about this, but I do think that I have thought enough that this solution could be actually effective. Now, this is about the truth. We're not talking about like, hey, let's get everybody counseling and then, that doesn't work. That's what we do right now. We think sending them to jail is going to rehabilitate them, but it doesn't. They come out and they commit worse and worse crimes until eventually they end up in jail permanently. It's all they know. And if they do manage to get clean on their own, that's great for them. I mean, everybody deserves that, and everybody deserves all the help and support they need. But don't forget about door number one at this horrible, horrible warehouse that people can go to, because that's the place you can go to get help too. But what it does is it keeps you off the street. It keeps you from robbing 80-year-old elderly people and robbing them and going off and buying narcotics from a drug dealer, illegally selling them on the street, who's putting however many lives at risk. If there's a place where you can go and do free drugs, and if you look and watch these documentaries on heroin addicts, like, I don't really trust a heroin addict, so I mean, it's hard to say whether or not they're telling the truth. But these heroin addicts, like, they claim they spend up to $500 a day on heroin. Like, they have to steal that. That's what they, or they trick that. They sell their body for prostitution. There's another point. You could, like, how many diseases are spread due to drugs being done unsafely in the streets, and the sex trade that goes along with it. All the women and men who turn to prostitution because of their narcotic addictions. Okay, so back to this horrible warehouse. Yeah, okay. Now they don't have to do that. We may be possibly eliminating more than just like the drug problem in the street. We might even be taking other problems along with it because they're all kind of walking hand in hand. So we have this horrible drug warehouse. People are dying in there. Possibly it has a crematorium attached to it, just so, whatever turnover it is. Well, what's going to happen? There's a few things that are going to happen. There's going to be a huge outrage in the families of the people who die in these places. There's going to be a big shift on the street about how drugs are sold, distributed, their value. Why would you go rob and steal and risk your freedom for drugs when you can go to this warehouse and just get them and do them for free? If you're going to be high, like, do you really care if you're outside? Like, if you're at this point that you're going to go do all these horrible things, you probably don't give a shit where you are. You just want to get high. So those are a couple things that would happen. Now, here's the third and most important thing that would happen. Eventually, people who are on drugs would be going to this place and seeing the horrible conditions that other people who are addicted to drugs have submitted themselves to. And they might decide on their own to make the choice to walk through the door that leads them for the mental and physical help that they need. Because as long as they're out on the street, they're not getting this help. But if we put them in a place where they're faced with two decisions, one, to continue their drug use and meet their inevitable demise, or two, get the help that they need. Now, it's my hope that when we first opened this warehouse, the side where the hospital was located was significantly smaller than the warehouse side where the drugs were located. But what I see is as time would progress, the hospital would need to be moved to the larger section of the warehouse, and the drug administration area would need to be moved to the smaller side. You're going to get a lot less people who are going to want to end up dead on a floor in a warehouse because they needed to get high. After a certain amount of time, it's just going to sink in. It's just going to become reality for people because people think that it can't happen to them, but it can. And when they see their friends use this place and die, and when they go in there themselves and use the place and be in those conditions, it will dawn on them and they will come to the realization that death is the only option if they continue on the path that they're on. However, if you provide them with the care of a hospital in the same location, then every time they approach this building, they're faced with a decision. And their decision can either save them or send them to an early grave. So I know this is a really horrible suggestion, and I'm fine with that because I don't care. I'm not, like I said, getting robbed every day, and I'm not at risk of drug addiction because, like I spoke about in the last video, I have an addictive personality, but I also have self-awareness, which means that I'm aware that if I started to do drugs, that would be the end of it for me. I love being alive. I would never want to sacrifice my life up for drugs, which is just the truth, especially not hard drugs. Like, they're so expensive. Like, oh my God, do you know how much money these people spend on these drugs? It's crazy. It's nuts if I had that much money. I mean, I don't go out and commit crime to get that much money because I don't need to, but they're on drugs and that's how they meet their needs. So let's help these people out. Let's eliminate their need to commit crimes. Let's give them what they want. Let's give them education. Let's show them the consequences. Now, let's move on to the last point I want to make, which is pretty fucking terrible. I don't know if this is going too far, but I'm going to say it anyways because it's part of the idea, and it's, God damn it, it's been part of the idea since the beginning. I would encourage school field trips, and I would bring kids who are at that 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old range, right before they get screwed and slipped into middle school where the bad decisions roll in. And I would walk them through, and I would show them. I'd say, this is what happens if you do drugs. This is what happens. People come here to die. People have lost all hope. They don't want to live anymore. So they come here and they choose, instead of going to the hospital, to come into the drug area and do drugs and die on the floor. And yeah, that's like really traumatic for kids. So I'm not sure it's a great idea, but it would get the fucking point across. We're not the society we once were. We're pretty fucking soft. One thing I always like to say is, like, I really hope that there's never a World War III, because North America is so screwed. The number of pussies running around is fucking insane. So anyways, that's my cure to the opioid epidemic. We open up a warehouse. We give people options. Do they want to get help, or do they want to continue to hurt themselves? I think this would eliminate the vast majority of drug-related crime, if not all of it. It could stop large operations from continuing their operations. I'm definitely not going to say more than that. It's a horrible, horrible solution, but you know what? The end of the road's not always pretty, right? And we need to come to the end of the road here, because it's really sad. I do watch a lot of crime. I watch a lot of real life or documentary style crime. And, when you hear these stories about people who were robbed, had their lives taken from them, had their children taken from them, and they've done absolutely nothing wrong in the name of somebody who's addicted to drugs. I mean, how could you afford any sympathy for that? Everybody needs to grow up. There's a lot of people on this planet, and we don't have room for people who don't have respect for other people's lives. Like I said in the beginning, we're trying to live in a society together. As far as I can tell, we're trying to coexist. And there's already a lot of stupid people running around doing stupid things. We don't need stupid people who are high running around and committing crimes. So hate troll as much as you want. It's T7. You get what you're given. You got warned at the beginning. Nobody forced you to watch this. I think that's the truth, and I thought so for a long time. Like, fuck them. You want to do drugs? You want to get high? Here's free drugs. Go get high. Like, your family's really mad at Troll because you died because you did drugs. Well, that's not my fault. That's your fault. I didn't make that decision for you. I just eliminated you off the street. I just eliminated you from killing grandma and grandpa so you could go get a fix. I just stopped you from driving high and hitting a little kid riding his bike down the street. I just stopped you from getting into a shootout with a bunch of other gang members. I just did a lot of stuff. And all I did was build a warehouse. You're going to have to build a lot of them, though. You're going to need one per major city, right? Before I end this episode, because I'm going to end it pretty quickly here, I do want to stress the 2 doors. One's a hospital. You are able to get help there. It's subsidized. You don't have to pay for it. It's specific. It's addiction counseling. It's a hospital where you can sober up. You can go through withdrawals safely, be monitored by medical staff. Like, when you're looking at tearing me and my idea apart, which inevitably I would expect you to do, just remember that I started out with the hospital. Because everybody needs help sometimes. We all get in rough places, and I can understand that better than anybody. So we have one segment of society that's high on drugs and hurting other segments of society who have chosen to live clean, sober lives, raise families, white picket fences, mortgages, the whole 9 fucking yards, right? So I'm just trying to come up with a way where everybody can get along. We can get people out of jail. You don't need to go to jail anymore, man. You don't need to stuff that meth in your sock and drive that car illegally. You just head on down to the warehouse, bro. Get help or get high. There's our slogan. Get help or get high. Right? Down at the warehouse. Okay, let's end it there. I'm Terrible Troll. Thanks for helping me send it. Holy fuck, it went far. Catch you on the next episode of T7. or maybe something else sooner. And there can't be any advertising. That's bad, right? We definitely don't want to like advertise. Come here, get your free fix. No worries, no issues. And